Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Stuart Irongutsman McCown, and we are here today to do a Disciples of Tzeentch review. Yeah, now it's been a while since I've done a video, I know that, but I think you'll enjoy today. I've tried to put a bit more time into the slides than I normally do, using a different piece of software. So, yeah, let's get into it. Now, the Disciples of Tzeentch book right now, before this book has come out, is I would say very bad in terms of internal balance. Like externally in the game it's fine, like it's a good army, but definitely right now horrors and the bin chickens are the strongest aspects of the book, and the mortal / arcanite aspect of the book is very much not very good. So I'm hoping through this book, well, at least before I read it, that there would be buffs to those units. Let's see what happens as we go. Okay. No spoilers. Alright, so yeah. Now, the way I'm going to structure this is we'll go through the allegiance abilities and the grand strats and battle tactics first, and then I'll go through all of the units in that order. So the spells and the battle line and other units, heroes, and then I've just got a couple lists at the end, just as a bit of food for thought. By no means have I had heaps of time to test, the stuff from this book and stuff. But I've just given some, basic guideline on a couple list directions, going forward. Okay, so without further ado, the allegiance abilities. Okay, so, there's not a huge amount of changes from last edition. The main new ability is this thing called Arcane Armies. So basically, start of the first battle round after each player receives their command points, so after you decide who's going first or second, you can auto-cast one of the Tzeentch Endless spells. So this is the Burning Sigil, the Tome of Eyes, or the Demonic Simulacrum. And then when you cast that, it can't be unbound and can't be dispelled on the first battle round. So basically, you can pick one of them to put on the board, and it can't be dispelled the first battle round. Now, cool thing about this is you get a fate point. Okay, so basically, whenever either player casts a spell successfully that's not unbound, then you get a fate point. And of course, this is casting a spell, so you do get a fate point for free, which is kind of fun. And then also, these things can't be unbound. Now, two of them are casting value 5, so it's great that they can't be unbound. But obviously, the effectiveness of this ability depends on the endless spell War Scrolls, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Okay. Destiny dice. You get 9 Destiny dice. They do all the things that they used to do. They've sort of cleaned up the wording a little bit, so, in terms of rend and that kind of thing. All the stuff that was brought through in the facts in previous editions, so when you use a Destiny dice on a save, it's still affected by rend. All this sort of thing has been fixed up a little bit. But no, you can't use Destiny dice on a redeploy, okay? And I was worried that was going to happen. I was so worried that was going to happen. And it didn't. Fucking hell. If you could put a 600 Destiny dice on a redeploy, it would be an absolute nightmare. So thankfully you can't do that. Locus of Change is still the same. I would have asked them to nerf this last edition, but because of all-out attack, -1 to hit's not as strong. But it's still strong ability, so -1 to hit for a demon unit if it's wholly within of a demon hero. That obviously includes the demon hero themselves, so your chickens are -1 to hit in combat, as are your little horror heroes, so it's a strong ability. Okay, and then as I mentioned before, the summoning. Now, the summoning chart hasn't changed, but the Exalted Greater Demon of Tzeentch is not there anymore. So this is the old summoning table, but you can't do the Greater Demon of Tzeentch for 45 fate points anymore. I mean, you wouldn't, but anyway, big loss. The main things here, I would say, are the Flux Master for 12 is really solid. And then obviously the 10 Blue Horrors for 10. 3 Screamers are situationally good. The Exalted Flamer can be decent if you've got some Flamers in your list. But then other than that, we're probably going to be shooting for the 20, which is the 10 Pink Horrors, which is kind of the crown jewel of this summoning pool. Once you get those 10 Pink Horrors in, it's really tasty. Especially considering Proving Grounds and Galatian Veterans and all that kind of thing at the moment. So those are the allegiance abilities. Okay, so next we have the sub-allegiances, okay? So basically you're going to pick one of these, and all the things in your army that don't already have a keyword gain this. So first one is a demon focus one, which is Eternal Conflagration. So you get +1 to rend and shooting for the Flamers, chariots, some hero stuff. Yeah, basically everything that has like flame in it, you get +1 rend. And Flamers of Tzeentch also become battle line. Like, pretty decent, but obviously depends on the strength of the Flamers and Horrors War Scrolls, as well as the comparison to other sub-allegiances. So, the problem with this one is there's another allegiance called Host Duplicitous, which basically means you can't retreat while you're within 3 of a Host Duplicitous unit with 10 or more models. And also you get an ability where once per battle, when a Horrors unit is destroyed, it could be any type, you can set up a unit of 5 Horrors on a 4-up, wholly within 12 of a friendly Host Duplicitous hero. Okay? So, yeah, this is obviously very strong. A bit of a nerf, since it used to just be, 3 inches of anything, including like spawns and that kind of thing, but still strong to have the access to the no retreat. I don't think it's as strong as in previous editions, especially in a singles environment, because heaps of armies have teleports now. Like, armies like Sylvaneth just sort of laugh at this sort of ability. But it's still good. In a team's environment, of course, it's going to be great to have this kind of hacky no-retreat army. But going forward, I wonder how much we'll see it. Okay, the Host Arcanum. Bit of a fall from grace here, I would say. So auto-bind once, unbind once per turn, battle round 1, 3, and 5. That's the same as it used to be. And you get Screamers as battle line, which is the same as before, but you've lost the, the command trait, which is a pre-game move of 6 inches for D3 units. You've lost the 6 free Screamers you would get, which is just outrageous, and also the command ability to give Screamers +1 save and +1 rend. So there's a few big losses there, but I think overall this is still very strong. There are some synergies with auto unbinding in the book, and in general, in the meta at the moment, there are quite a few armies where you do need to auto unbind one thing. Especially with Destiny dice involved. Like, if you're worried about a certain endless spell going off, like, for example, Thankwall getting on his boat, okay? If you're worried about that going off, then having this auto unbind is obviously amazing. Because otherwise, his Flamers can be a problem for, big units of Horrors and that kind of thing. So I think this is actually more handy than you think it would be. And I really like this one. Okay, and then we got the 3 mortal ones. So the Cult of the Transient Form. The Karrak Acolytes get to pile in an attack on death on a 2-5. And then if you roll a 6, you can add a model to a Zangor host unit wholly within 9. It's actually wholly within 9 of the slain model. I haven't read that there, right? Yeah, wholly within 9 of the slain model. So obviously completely unrealistic. So this is awful, this one. It's just terrible. Okay, Pyrophane Cult. +1 to hit for Karrak Acolyte shooting. Fine, cool. And if an enemy unit suffers any wounds from the shooting, at the end of the shooting phase, they take D3 mortal wounds on a 5-up. This is alright, but I'll talk about it later, but with the way Karrak Acolytes work, +1 to hit's just not that great of a buff, because probably you'd want to stack the rend on one unit anyway. So you could just all-out attack the unit, and it's not like this book is particularly command point heavy, so it's totally fine to do that. I think this would have been cool if it changed the hit characteristic to a 3-up instead of a 4-up, and then you could stack all-out attack with it. That could have been fun, but as it stands, this one is just okay. It's fine. And then Guild of Summoners. So fate points can only be spent on bin chickens. Great. So they cost 9 and then 18 thereafter, but they can only be set up wholly within 9 of an Arcanite hero. So there's a bit of there's a bit of counterplay here, because if all your Arcanite heroes die, you can no longer summon chickens. So you can't summon chickens from chickens like you used to be able to. Now, there's a bit of buff here. It used to be 9, 18, and then 30. So with 9, 18, and 18, that's 45 fate points, which is difficult, but not unrealistic over a 5-turn game. The only issue is once you reach to turn 5, obviously summoning a Lord of Change on turn 5 doesn't particularly do much. So on turn 5, a much better summon would be 10 Blue Horrors. So I think the main point of a Guild of Summoners is getting the first Lord of Change on turn 1. That's the main point. And then after that, the summon you get is kind of whatever. You probably get the next one maybe turn 3, which is still decent, but you're only going to get 2 useful turns out of that Lord of Change, because you summon him at the end of the movement phase, so he doesn't get to do spells. So, yeah, you're only going to get turn 4 and 5 out of him. So, I think, yeah, it's a good early game kind of one, but the late game suffers. So, basically, you kind of tilt your power curve a little bit. Normal Tzeentch is probably better late game than this one because, you know, you have access to body summon, and you can also summon, like, some flamers or something that has, like, an immediate impact. But this, like, sure, you can summon a Lord of Change and Destiny Dice at charge, but he doesn't do that much damage in combat. So, yeah, I think it's limited late game, good early game. Okay, so those are the main allegiance abilities. Okay, so let's talk about the spell laws. The first one is the Law of Fate, which has 6 spells. And much like the last book, this is the stronger of the 2 spell laws. So, first spell is Arcane Suggestion, cast on an 8, which is high, and it has range 18, and you pick an enemy unit, and they suffer one of the following effects you can pick. They can't receive, issue commands, amazing. -1 to save, amazing. -1 to hit and hit and wound in melee and shooting, amazing. And they all last until the next hero phase. All of those effects are awesome. This is a great spell. Nothing negative to say about it, except obviously that the range is 18 inches, but that's a bit of a symptom of Tzeentch in general, and something we're very much used to. Okay, Shield of Fate. Casting value 6, range 18. You pick a friendly unit wholly within range, and the effect depends on the current Destiny Dice quantity. So if you've got 1 or 3 Destiny Dice, 6 up ward, 4 to 6, it's a 5 up ward, 7 to 9, it's a 5 up ward and a 4 up spell ignore. It lasts until the next hero phase. And you just check how many Destiny Dice you have when you cast the spell. So you cast the spell, and then whatever the amount of Destiny Dice is at that time, you get the effect that corresponds to that. You don't keep checking every time you roll a ward save or something, right? So as long as you got 4 Destiny Dice when you cast this, then you're going to get it off, okay? Now, given an effect like this, a 5-up ward's going to be useful the whole game, but you want to use Destiny Dice, you probably want a way to replace Destiny Dice, okay? Which is what this next spell is for. Okay, Glimpse the Future. So cast on a 7, you roll a new Destiny Dice. Nice. Obviously, you can't cast it at 9 Destiny Dice because you can only ever have 9 at a time. Yep, solid. I think you probably want someone who can do this in all of your lists. Yeah, great. Infusion Arcanum. Caster gets +1 to hit and wound until next hero phase. Would be great if Archeon could get it. Unfortunately, he can't, so I don't know who uses this. It's okay, but I mean, it's a good spell, but there's no real good target for it, so meh. Okay, Treacherous Bond. Casting value 5, range of 9. You pick one each mortal unit in range, and the caster gets a 3-up bodyguard pass off until the next hero phase while that unit's within 9. This one is alright. It's a little bit awkward because you've got to have a Tzeentch mortal unit in your army, and it's got to not be dead, which is difficult because it's only Kyrek Acolytes or other heroes. So, yeah, you could ally in something from Slaves to Darkness. Like, you could put some, I don't know, some Chaos Warriors or something in here. Yeah, something that can take a Tzeentch mark, and then you could do it with them. But this costs you a spell, obviously, to survive. So, yeah, it's tricky. I think it's decent on the Curseling because you kind of want to keep him alive, and it obviously gives him like a 3-up ward. But otherwise, maybe a little bit difficult to use. Yeah. Okay, and then Bolt of Tzeentch. Cast on a 7, 18, does D6 mortals. Cool, solid. Yep, so that's the Law of Fate. Some great ones there. Obviously, I think the first 3 are better than the second 3, but still solid overall. Okay, so next we have the Demon one, Law of Change, which is 5 spells for some reason. Fine. So, Treason of Tzeentch, casting value 7, range 18. You need to pick an enemy unit with 2 or more models. It's a 6-up chord clear and gives them -1 to hit. You used to have to kill a model to get the -1 to hit, but they got rid of that. This is fine. The damage is not really much, but the -1 to hit is solid. Yeah, because you can basically stack it with the Demon -1 to hit, and that means if your opponent uses all-out attack, it still doesn't work. So, solid. But, I mean, I guess it was stronger last edition when you could stack it with other minuses to hit, and they couldn't all-out attack. So, it's alright. Okay, Unchecked Mutation. Ranged 18, casting value 6. You pick one enemy unit within range, it takes D3 mortals. If any models die, then you roll another dice. On a 3-up, they take D3 more mortals. So, best effect is basically 2D3 mortals. Yeah, it's okay. I mean, it's cast on a 6, which is nice, but they've got to obviously have more than one model for this to work. So it's sort of a rung down than some of the other damage spells. Fold Reality, casting value 7, range 18. Tzeentch Demon Unit wholly within range gets D6 models back, but on a 1, the whole unit's destroyed. So basically on a 2-up, you get that many models back. On a 1, the whole unit's destroyed. Yeah, this is obviously an amazing spell, but there are not that many things you can use it on. So that's the thing to consider. It's really only Screamers which are a viable target. Obviously, Flamers and that, you can use it too, but as we'll see, the points cost for them is kind of a bit prohibitive. So, yeah, this is really, yeah, Tzeentch Demon Unit may as well just write Screamers of Tzeentch. There. I don't think you really got to use it on much else. Cool. So, Tzeentch's Firestorm, cast on 8, range 12, it used to be 18. You roll 9 dice for each 6 the unit takes 3/3 mortals, which is super swingy. It can be really good or it can do absolutely nothing. This is an okay spell. The range is terrible, so that's a bit prohibitive. Okay. And then we have Bolt of Tzeentch, which is cast on a 7, 18. The same one as the Law of Fate, D6 mortals, and you can't cast both. Okay, so those are the spell laws. Okay, now I'm not going to go through all of these command traits because a lot of them are just terrible. So the 2 ones with Arcanites that are good are the Cult Demagogue and the Arcane Sacrifice. So I'll just talk about them. So the Demagogue, you have to take it on a wizard. If a casting rolls a double and the casting attempt is successful, it can't be unbound, and you also receive 2 fate points instead of 1. So yeah, so basically if you roll a double, your opponent can't unbind it and you get 2 fates instead of 1. You can obviously use Destiny dice to make it so that it's automatically a double, so you can kind of cheat with this. Obviously some synergy there with using this to get more fate points, and then, you know, having ways to replace Destiny dice is also obviously great with it. So solid. And then Arcane Sacrifice at the start of hero phase can do a mortal to a Tzeentch unit within 3 of the general, and you add 9 to the spell range. That's really nice because, you know, what I was saying, a lot of these spells have 18-inch range, so like putting, for example, Arcane Suggestion up to 27-inch range is great. Yeah, now the negative of this is that you have to have, you know, a Tzeentch unit within 3 of the general, and, you know, you got to make sure that the general doesn't die to really make use of this. I mean, same with Cold Demagogue, but yeah, the basic problem with these Arcanite command traits is that the body that they go on ends up being very squishy. So both of these have very specific game plans, both of which kind of require the dude to be in like decently close range to your opponent. So yeah, there's definitely something to consider here, whether you want to take a squishy general with these good command traits, or you want to take a demon general, which can be a chicken with, well, they're a bit bin. The one that I think is the highlight is probably Nexus of Fate. You don't get an extra Destiny dice, but you can replace a Destiny dice in your pool with it, which is decent. Unfortunately, you obviously can't use this and Cult Demagogue because that would be great synergy, but it's okay. Demon Spark, I think, is quite good in Guild of Summoners. And I think it's okay in general, and then the other 2 are obviously terrible. So these command traits are quite limited. Master of Magic also looks quite good compared to all of these, so that's something to consider. Okay, and then we have the artifacts for Arcanites. I think the only one here that's sort of okay is Demon Heart, where at the start of combat you pick one enemy unit within 1 and they take a number of mortal wounds equal to the battle round. But the only problem with Demon Heart is it's going to be on a body that's not particularly survivable, so it's hard to keep it around to the later battle rounds. So I think all of these are really bad, and you would expect to take Arcane Tome before all of these. Okay. And then the demon ones, yeah, there's a bunch of good ones here. Beacon of Mortality, +1 to wound for demons wholly with a 9 in melee. It's solid if you're not going to take a Fate Master, who gives +1 to wound, as we'll talk about later. Yeah, you know, being able to give +1 to wound in melee seems like a really strong ability, right? Obviously, you can have the +1 to wound in melee, and then the -1 to hit aura up off the same model, so that's good. You don't have to, like, put the Fate Master there for +1 to wound, and you don't have to, and then have another demon hero there. You can just have it on one guy, like a Flux Master or something, right? It's like a Flux Master surrounded by a blob of Screamers. They'll get +1 to wound in melee and -1 to hit. That's actually pretty good. 9-eyed Tome, you can reroll cast Unbinds and Dispels for the bearer. That's obviously ridiculous. That's amazing. Eternal Shroud, I didn't say is a particularly good one, but it's fine. It existed last edition. I used it a couple times. It's decent. If you've got like heaps of ways to add Destiny dice and recycle them and that kind of thing, it's pretty good, I think. Yeah. So it's worth considering if you can kind of find the enhancements. The only thing that's difficult with this army is often you want to take a spell enhancement, and then your first thing is going to be Arcane Tome. So it's often quite difficult to find that third enhancement there. So you can, like, it's difficult to fit double Warlord here. So I think most of the time you'll end up going Arcane Tome and spell enhancement. But if you don't, you probably go Arcane Tome and Night-Eyed Tome for that double tome action. Yeah, that's what I think so far. Okay, so that's all the gear. Let's talk about battle tactics and grand strategies. So I want to spend a little bit more time on this than other aspects of the presentation, because as much as there is criticism about battle tactics and grand strategies, this is very, very considerably important, especially for an army like Tzeentch that doesn't do a lot of damage. It's going to be very important to have access to battle tactics and grand strategies. Like, for example, something like gaining momentum, which forces you to kill a unit, might be kind of difficult for this army. Often stuff like even Bystreet enemy lines can be kind of difficult because it has to be starting army. So yeah, that's something to consider with this army, is how easy the battle tactics are to do. So the grand strategies, I think there are two here that are really manageable. Master Destiny, at the end of battle, if you have any Destiny dice left and they total a 9 up, you score it, which is obviously amazing, because if your opponent tables you, you still get it. So it's like that Daughters of Cain one, where there's not really that much counterplay on your opponent's part. Obviously amazing. And then the other one, which I think is good, is Dominate Arcane Nexus, where you just need to have a Horrors, Acolyte, or Wizard unit holding with it each quarter of the battlefield. It doesn't say different. So again, like Show of Dominance, you can just stick one of them in the middle and score it. I think this is still overall harder than Master of Destiny, but if you find yourself limiting how many Destiny dice you actually use because of the first thing, this one I think is solid, because if you win the game, you're going to get this. So you kind of have to think about that. It's a bit of a win more one, whereas the other one is a bit of a lose less one. You know what I mean? Yeah, like if you've used all 9 Destiny dice to win the game, and you needed those last 2 or 3 Destiny dice to guarantee it, and you're finding that situation arises a bit, I would recommend you try the Dominate Arcane Nexus one. And both of these are definitely easier than the options in the GHB. So I think you're picking between these two. Okay, and then battle tactics. So the first one is summon a Lord of Change. So that's the thing with Guild of Summoners, right? So that's what I was saying about the power curve. So you know you're going to be able to do this at some point, right? Because as long as you have 9 fate points, you can do this. So you can float a battle tactic super well with this. So the strength of the sub-faction is not only like the effect, but the fact that you get a free battle tactic. So that makes it, I think, a little bit more tempting. Yeah, okay. Okay, Mass Conjuration. Wizard casts 3 or more spells on that turn, and none are unbound. Okay, so there aren't that many wizards that can do this. So, off the top of my head, you can do this with Kairos. You can do this with the Lord of Change with Arcane Tome. You can do this with a Cursing with Arcane Tome, and I think that's it. And a Gaunt Summoner with Arcane Tome. So, I think those are the 4 that can do it. Yeah, I think overall, maybe you won't build around this, because even if you do have a 3-cast wizard, you can obviously still miscast and flub some rolls and fail a battle tactic, which in this kind of army that doesn't do a lot of damage, you really cannot afford to fail a battle tactic. Often that might lose you the game. So I think you might just give up on that one. Yeah. Okay, 9-fold Dismemberment. Pick enemy hero or monster with 9 or more wounds on profile, or 9 or more models. Score when destroyed. This is great. Now, the only thing is, they do have to have 9 or more models currently in the unit. So, like, if you've done some wounds or your opponents ran into you, you're not going to be able to do it. But 9 or more models is not difficult to kill. Like, killing like a 10 wound screen is totally achievable, even for like a relatively low damage army like this. So I think that one's really solid. Yeah, you're gonna want to build in some ability to kill screens. So that signals you probably want some, like, just a couple bounty hunter units to throw at screens to achieve this. But yeah, super strong battle tactic. Okay. Reckless Abandon. Pick one mortal Daughters of Tzeentch unit more than 18 from enemy units, and you score if they complete a charge in that turn. So this is great if you've got a mortal dude on a disc, because they can just kind of do it with Destiny dice. If they're on foot, often they can't do it because they move 6 inches or less, right? So what you would need is like Lorcon or Bridge or something. So this is something worth considering. Off the top of my head, I think the units that can do it are the Magister on disc and the Fate Master. Okay? Now, the Fate Master is in there most of the time anyway, so the fact that he gets you a battle tactic just for free for existing, I think is a bit ludicrous. But, I mean, this one's just kind of another free battle tactic, right? Like, you're just going to get it and not really interact with the game, because you can just Destiny dice the charge if you want. So, that's the thing. Now, obviously, the way your opponent can play around it is by putting a unit within 18. But, of course, you could just backboard the guy. You could move away for one turn and then set it up for another turn. All sorts of things you could do here. It's really annoying to have to play around this type of battle tactic as well, because it's not like you can put a unit within 18 and then avoid, like, for example, you could put a screen within 18 and then your opponent just picks Ninefold Dismemberment, right? So it's not, there's not really that much counterplay here. Okay, and the last thing is Tides of Anarchy. You score an objective your opponent controls and have 9 or more models within 6 of it. So basically, you just move some horrors on there and you get it. So, I mean, like, looking at this, you can definitely easily build a list in Guild of Summoners that can do all of them, right? You just take Kairos in Guild of Summoners. So you have a wizard that can cast 3 or more spells. You take a Fate Master or a Magister on a disc. You take some horrors, and you can do all 5 of these battle tactics. Okay? Now, you don't need to do all 5 of them, because obviously there's heaps of doable ones in, you know, the GHB as well. But the fact that you've got, I think, 3 really easy ones, and then 2 that are, like, a little bit build dependent, makes this army, like, really annoying to play against from a scoring perspective. Like, it's going to be really hard to score huge against Tzeentch, because you're going to have, right, you're going to have the Master of Destiny that's basically guaranteed, and then you're going to have 3 battle tactics that are more or less guaranteed as well, if the game's, like, going anywhere reasonable for the Tzeentch player. So instantly, like, I think the only way you can win is by dominating the primary. But as we'll see, like, in terms of objective securing, this army is always going to be incredibly strong at doing that, because you have horrors, okay? So the fact that you've got 3 strong battle tactics and 2 great grand strategy options immediately puts this army at an amazing power level. So that's the grand strategy and battle tactics. Okay, so let's talk about the units. So first of all, we have well, we'll talk about the endless spells, but I need to go through my rating system. So I've done a bit of a rating system for all the units here. So we have Stonks. Like, this is just a good unit, and you're going to see it played. We have Meh. This is a war scroll that could be good, but reading it makes me feel slightly depressed. And then Bin, it's just like, let's just move on. Like, let's just not even talk about this. This is awful. There's not that many Bin units in this book, but there's quite a few Meh units and heaps of Stonks units. Okay, so let's get into the endless spells. So the first one we're going to talk about is Burning Sigil. So remember, all of these endless spells can be automatically cast at the start of the game, and they can't be unbound in the first, dispelled in the first battle round, okay? Alright, now Burning Sigil is cast on a 5 and has 18-inch range. It doesn't move, it's not predatory, it just sits there. At the end of the movement phase, so in both your turn and your opponent's turn, you roll a dice for each unit holding within, just within 9. Affects you and your opponent. On a 4-up, the unit suffers D3 mortals, and once per phase, it can turn a slain model into a spawn. Okay? So a couple things here. 18-inch range is not huge, considering the start of game deployment. Yeah, like a lot of the missions now start 18 away, but it's pretty easy for your opponent to kind of play around this, especially if you're low drop. Like if you're high drop, you can like put a wizard in a better spot for this. But if you're low drop and you have to deploy your whole army first, it's going to be quite obvious for your opponent where you're going to put it. So that's something to consider a little bit, right? Like maybe I want to go higher drop so I can see what my opponent's going to do, and then put a wizard in a place where I can actually put this in a good spot. So I think instantly, from my perspective, Games Workshop is saying that this army like always wanted to be low drop, and so they might be trying to change that a little bit. So just keep that in mind for when we go into list construction. So this can obviously make yourself a spawn, which we'll see later is now only one of the ways to do that, because Kairos can no longer make spawns. Making a spawn is good, but I think the problem with it is your opponent gets to choose what model is removed. So if they're good at the game, they're not going to stuff it up. I think the competitive community slightly overestimates how good summoning a spawn is. I think if your opponent's aware about what you're trying to do, it's a little bit less strong. Now, there are certain armies which it's like stupidly strong, like Iron Jaws, for example. But then, of course, with this, it's at the end of the movement phase. So since it's at the end of the movement phase, it's not going to stop something like Mighty Destroyers. And also, your opponent's going to be able to move away from it. But the interesting part about it is if you set it up in such a way where maybe your opponent's going to go for an Alpha Strike or something, right? You can set it up where like they move a unit within 9 of it, and then like on a 4-up, you might be able to turn a model into a spawn and then stop that unit from charging. So you got to think about this more as like, okay, we're either going to stop maybe something from shooting, we're going to stop something from charging me. There's all sorts of things you can do here to mess with your opponent's plans, which is why I've given this thing a stonks rating. I think this thing is awesome. Like, I think it's a bit more difficult to play than it looks because it's at the end of the movement phase, but the fact that you can like stick this somewhere and just say, if you move here, you're going to risk me turning like one of your 30 Iron Drakes into a spawn, and then you not being able to shoot anything other than the spawn, right? Which is just like, that's just game over when that happens, right? So this sort of defensive counterplay that helps you against your opponent's first turn potential Alpha Strike is really important for an army like Tzeentch, which tends to be on the squishier side, aside from the horrors. So this is a really good inclusion, I think, especially for maybe the more strategically oriented kind of player. Okay, then we have the Flaming Chickens. They're all right. Like, they set up 12, move 9. So, the effect range is the same as the Burning Sigil because it has a 6-inch effect range as well. So basically 27, the same as the Sigil. Of course, the difference is here, this one is not at the end of the movement phase, it's the end of the hero phase. So you're more guaranteed to get it. But the effect is middling. On average, it's going to do 3 mortals or like 4.5 mortals to a wizard. So it's okay. I'm giving this one a meh rating. I know some people who've commented on this say that you can block with it, but the base size is not really big enough to be able to do that effectively. It's okay. Like, it's just an okay endless spell. Okay, and then the next one we have is Tome of Ice, which I've seen people really not like this, but this is just for Kairos. This is what he needs, because he doesn't have reroll to cast. And aside from Cogs, there's nowhere to get it. But this is just guaranteed to go off. Like, it's going to go off. Kairos is going to have rerolls to cast. And there's nothing your opponent can do about it for the first turn, right? So this is just Kairos' best friend. I probably would never take this with anyone else. Maybe a Curseling. But yeah. Basically, the rules are they're more or less entirely irrelevant other than the rerolls to cast. Like, it gives you this spell that's just terrible. Like, it's cast on an 8, range 18. On a 3-up, does D3 mortals. Whatever. The fun thing about this spell is it actually increases your threat range a little bit for Kairos, because you can do stuff like deploy, it just sets up within an inch. So you set up within an inch, and then this is on a 40mm base, I believe. So it basically gives you another almost 2 inches. So it gives you like 2 and a bit. I think it's like 2.5 inches more threat range in terms of spells, and then also importantly unbinding. That unbinding thing actually matters quite a bit. So yeah, I mean it's handy. This is like a pretty good spell. I think if you take Kairos, you're going to heavily consider this. You might take this and the Burning Sigil as well, and it depends on the game which one you're going to choose to use. Like Spell Portal, this and Sigil is a really like good combination. I definitely would consider that. So this one, A+ for me. Okay, so those are the endless spells. So let's get into the Battleline units. Okay. So we have our Horrors of Tzeentch, which are the Battleline. Now, I was really hoping they'd nerf these. Or just do something to stop it. You can't keep letting them get away with this. You just can't. But here we are. It's exactly the same War Scroll. So 50 wounds for 250 points. The perfect Expert Conquerors, because, you know, they end up being 20 models. So it's like 60 models for an objective. They have like pretty good shooting in combat. Like it's 4s and 4s in combat. And if you're a Brimstone, like they actually are pretty good in combat with like, if you're all Brimstones, it's 40 attacks, 4s and 4s. Which if you buff it, it's like actually pretty good. It definitely adds up. The shooting is fine. It's not like game changing, but it's fine. Yeah, now you get 1 banner per 10 pinks, and it gives you a fate point on a 3-up. I don't know why we need that as well. I also don't know why the Musician gives you +1 save. These are the questions that I have in my deep mind. Like, why can't the Horn just be like all the other terrible demon ones where you have to reroll Battle Shock of 1? Like, I think that would be fine. I don't know why they need to have +1 save, but they do. Now, there's some janky stuff you can do in terms of whether or not these guys are Battleline. So obviously that it says Battleline at the top here, but actually they're only Battleline if they're all pinks. So if you take, for example, 9 pinks and 1 blue, you still pay 250 points for them to be pink Horrors of Tzeentch, but they don't end up being Battleline, which is good for the whole GV situation. I'm still not 100% sure how I feel about doing that. It might just be better to have Galatian veterans, because of course they do die to bounty hunters, but if you have a unit of 20 and your opponent just puts a proving ground down, the 20 doesn't do much. So if you're going to do the 20 that are not GVs, you're probably going to want to have more Horrors. I would say like probably 2 units of 10 and Expert Conquerors. So you have like a 20 up the front, which you're using as the screen for the other Horrors. But this means that you end up having 40 Horrors, which is not something that many humans on this earth want to play with, but for those that do, I think that's a strong way to do it. So those are Horrors of Tzeentch. I was really hoping they'd change these guys, but here we are, and I've given them 3 stonks marks because this is still the best unit in the book, and it's still going to be an absolute pain in the ass to play against, and no matter what GHB we're in, they're always going to be good. And I was really hoping they'd change them because we're not going to see another change for like another 3 years. But here we are. So this is the future we live in. This is the world we live in. All we can do is but accept it and try and make these guys into the strongest list we possibly can. Okay, so those are Horrors of Tzeentch. Okay, the other battle line choices. We have Kharak Acolytes. Now, all these other battle line choices, we have to consider, do these do anything that Horrors don't do? And if they do something, is it worth it compared to the loss we're getting from not taking Horrors? So these guys are 10 wounds with a 5-up save for 120 points. Now, let's just go back to the previous slide. 50 wounds for 250 points. 10 wounds for 120 points. So, okay, so for the same cost, so for 240 points of Kharak Acolytes, you get 20 wounds with a 5-up save. Now, by the way, the pink Horrors have a horn, so they also basically have a 5-up save. So, yeah, there's a problem there, obviously, immediately in terms of internal balance. They get a 6-up ward with a shield, though, these guys, which is alright. Okay, now they have a few little rules. If an enemy wizard casts a spell with an 18, they can do a mortal wound on a 4-up. Fine. Their spell, they actually cast a spell, which is cool, but they can only cast their War Scroll spell, which is this one. So +1 rend to an Acolyte unit wholly within 9. But you can now stack it on the same unit. Now, their weapon profile is 18-inch range, which is nice. I like that. 1 attack, 4s and 3s, no rend, 1 damage. Okay, but you could obviously stack the same rend. Like you could have a 30 acolytes, a 10 acolytes, a 10 acolytes, stack all the rend on the same unit. You can have -3 rend and then have 30 attacks, which you could buff to 3s in Pyrophane Cult, 2s with the Fate Master, -3 rend, damage 1. Now, how many points have you had to invest to do that? Well, you've had to invest about 600 points for the acolytes and then 145 points for the Fate Master. So that's 745 points. Now, to get them in range, you're probably also going to want to take Lorcon or Bridge. So that's like another 30 points for Lorcon, right? So that's 775 points. And how many wounds is 50 acolytes? How many is it? 50. And how many points are these guys? Now, I don't want to like overly simplify it because obviously the acolytes do a bit more damage, right? But then you also kind of look at it, you go back and you go, okay, well, how many shots does 750 points of horrors have? Well, they have, that's 30 horrors, which is 90 shots, and it is 5s and 4s, but you could give them an extra round in Eternal Conflag. Now, that's obviously lower damage than the acolytes, but it's 150 wounds instead of 50. So, my opinion on these guys, I've given them a meh rating to be polite. Personally, I think they're actually bin, but look, I'm open-minded. If someone can make them work, I'm going to be happy for everybody. One thing that's decently nice about them is that they're still wizards when they have 9 models. So if you kill one with Lorcon, then they're still going to have the wizard keyword. It's just a small thing, but it's kind of nice. Another few things that have changed, the double blades now give them +1 attack and +1 to hit instead of reroll hits. So, like +1 to hit on their profile, that is. So, they'll actually be 2 attacks, 3s, no rend, 1 damage in melee with the cursed blade, the paired cursed blades. That's pretty good actually, for their points. Not bad. The shield gives them a 6-up ward, but I don't think that's worth it overtaking the double blades. So these guys are okay. They're fine. I don't think they're anything compared to horrors, but they're still alright. Okay, so next we have the Zangors. 20 wounds for a 5-up save for 175, so it's better than Kyrag Acolytes, but still worse than horrors instead of wounds ratio. So you'd kind of get like 30-something wounds for the same points as horrors, right? Yeah, you'd get like maybe a bit less than that. Actually, that's exactly 30. No, a bit less than that. But yeah, they're Bravery 5, which is a major problem. Major problem. Movement 6. They can use an Ornate Totems ability. Now, a lot of reviewers, I felt like, just forgot about this or something. Like, it's a good ability, but it's always been the case. So, I mean, it's good to highlight rules, but this one, it's just fine. It does what it always does. You pick an enemy new with an 18, and you roll a dice for each wizard within 9 of this unit, and 4 does a mortal wound. The problem of this is always the case of, like, you want to take like lots of 10s of Zangors, and then you want to take Kyrag Acolytes, and then like some heroes. But that composition of list just seems super strange and squishy to me, so I think you don't want to lean on this too much. In Tzeentch, you might do it in Beasts of Chaos, and these guys are indeed very good in Beasts of Chaos, because they have a bunch of no-rend attacks, like a lot of no-rend attacks, because you go the pairs of Savage Blades now, and you know the mutants get +1 on them. So like this, a lot of the models here that have 4 pair of Savage Blade attacks, and then the beaks get +1 attack on the charge. So you'd have like 6 attacks per models on the mutant. And if you're giving them -1 rend on rounds 1 and 2, and -2 rend on 3, 4, 5, you can have like, you know, if you give them +1 to hit from all that attack, you could be like 2s and 3s, -2 rend, 1 damage on every unit on like all the models, and have like a million attacks. I think these guys are very solid in Beasts of Chaos. In Tzeentch, they don't have any rend. Now, there's ways to debuff your opponent's rend in Tzeentch, but that's not as good as just having the buff. And obviously, in Beasts of Chaos, you also get like Battle Shock. Not immunity, but reduction from the Shrine, and also, the Rally as well on a 4-up. So I think these guys are absolutely amazing in Beasts of Chaos, but in Tzeentch, they're just okay. Okay. And then we have Screamers, which I've seen a massive glow up. I didn't see it the first time I looked through them. I just thought they were whatever. But I think they're actually great. So the 9 wounds at the 5-up save for 100 points, which is like decently low. It's still actually better than Kyric Acolytes, but just ridiculous to me. But there you go. They're Bravery 10, Movement 16. Excellent on both accounts. Now, they no longer do extra damage per monsters, but they have gained -1 random +1 to hit. So they're now 3 attacks, 3s, 3s, -1, rand 1 damage, okay? Now, their Slashing Fins ability, it used to only work on a normal move. Now it also works on retreat, run, normal move, and charge, okay? And it's now on a 4-up instead of a 5-up. So you do, for each model in the unit that passes over the enemy unit, you roll a 4-up and do a mortal wound. So you do it when you normal move, and then you can also do it when you charge. So you could do it twice per turn. So like on a unit of 6, you could do basically 6 mortals over a course of a turn, which is really solid for 200 points. And their combat is like pretty good as well. These guys are Battle Line in Host Arcanum. And it's quite difficult to me to decide which angle you want to go, whether you want to make them Expert Conquerors or not. I think probably no, because they have small enough bases to be in range with a unit of 6 anyway. And the other thing to consider is the fact that these guys don't have mounts. Like, they're riders, but they don't have mounts. It's the same situation as Direwolves from Soulblood Gravelords, so of course they're going to become Galatian Veterans, which will make them more susceptible to being hit. So I think probably these guys you don't want to take as Battle Line, but it depends on your army composition. When we get to the end, I'll talk about it, but you can take maybe like a unit of 20 Horrors as non-GVs, and then take these guys as GVs, or you could do it the other way around, like take these guys as non-GVs, and then you take the Horrors as GVs. That decision is, I think, a big part of list building for me, and I'm not sure which one is the best, but for anyway, these guys are a really solid unit. And obviously a very distinct role to the Horrors, right? Like, these guys do mortal wounds, and they're fast. The Horrors do not do mortal wounds, and they're slow, but they have heaps of wounds. These guys do not have heaps of wounds, so what I was saying before, we want to like have a unit that has a distinct role, that's not just the same thing that's a bit worse, right? Like I think the Kyrics are. These guys have a distinct role, and that's why they have the Stonks rating. Okay, other units in here. This thing is awful, just absolutely awful, and it sucks because I think the model's pretty cool. So it's 6 wounds with a 4-up save for 180 points, which is obviously not good. The shooting profile is okay. 4 attacks, 4s, 3s, -1 rend D3. Could be -2 rend in internal conflag. They get +1 to hit in shooting and combat for like the Exalted Flamer weapons if target has 5 or more models. Fine. But they still hit on 4s, so maximum you can get is 3-up. After this unit's made a normal move, run, or retreat, so not when it charges like the Screamers, you can do 1. So it's gone down from D3 to 1. Mortal wound to an enemy unit on a 2-up. Yeah, now I think this unit just costs like 50 points more than it should because of Fold Reality, because you could obviously take 3 of them and then bring like 2 of them back when you Fold Reality, but it's like 3 of them is 18 wounds on a 4-up save for 540 points. Like, it's terrible. It's just terrible. It doesn't even do that much damage in combat or shooting. It's like okay. Yeah, this thing's terrible. Alright, moving on. Flamers are 190 points for 6 wounds and a 4-up save, which is obviously mega expensive. They have shooting profile, which is 18-inch range. 3 attacks. It went from 4s to 3s to 3s and 4s for some reason. No rend, D3 damage. Get -1 rend in internal conflag. They're also Battle Line in internal conflag. They get +1 to hit for their Moors, and which is their combat weapon, and Warp Flame if the target has, sorry, that should say 5 or more models. And they get +1 attack while they're wholly within a Flamer or a Chariot. Yeah, I can see these guys being taken as like a sort of singleton, so you just take 6. Inside or outside of internal conflag? Probably inside. And yeah, you just like summon in the Exalted Flamer for 12 fate points, and you just stick him to this unit, and you just have like a good like little shooting threat for like pretty low investment. I can see that being a thing, but outside of that, I wouldn't spam them. No. Alright. So, other units. We have the Exalted Flamer. Okay. So 130 points, 4 wounds at a 4-up save. You might summon this guy. Other than that, no. Zangor Skyfires, 190 points. Bravery 6 is a problem, okay, but 16-inch moves and 4 wounds at a 4-up save. Now, obviously, with this kind of unit, I think the bravery is less of a problem because you don't have that many models in the unit. So it's always realistic to be able to just throw a 1 at the Destiny dice and ignore the battle shock with these guys. So if you have 6, for example, unless your opponent has negatives to bravery, you would actually never lose the battle shock test, right? Because you can just chuck a 1 at it once you lose 5. So that's something to consider with these guys. Is if you're gonna roll low on the Destiny dice, like that's what these guys are gonna use. So I don't think the bravery 6 on a unit like this is actually much of a concern. Now. Their attack profile, they have 1 shot each with the Arrow of Fate, 4s and 3s, neg 1 ren, d3 damage. The champ will get an extra shot, so it's 4 shots from a unit of 3. It does d3 mortals on a 6 to hit, and it's guided by Fate, so it ignores some negative modifiers to hit and wound rolls, and also positive modifiers to save from the shooting, okay? So it's kind of funny to me that they've done that, because it's like, oh, look at all these power creeping save profiles and these power creeping like minuses to hit and stuff, but they just ignore it. I mean, the only thing with this that's a little bit strange is that the D3 mortals and this are sort of a bit anti-synergy. Like, well, not anti-synergy, but like ignoring positive modifiers to save and negative modifiers to hit and wound doesn't do anything when you do mortals on 6s to hit. So, like, if you're going to hit on 3s, it's only the 3, 4, 5 that's actually going to matter on. So, I mean, it's a decent ability, but, like, it's sort of like the missile weapon profile with the mortals doesn't really match with this ability that well. It'd be much better on a unit like Kyrix or something, which have lots of low-quality shots rather than, high-quality shots that do mortals. It's a bit weird. And the combat profile for these guys now is quite bad, so I'm not huge about these guys. I wasn't before, even when they had better combat. So I think they're just okay. In Beasts of Chaos, they're better again because you got Rally and because you've got ability to buff the Ren, so the combat actually ends up being alright. But even then, I think they're outshone by the next unit, which is Zangor Enlightened, which are still bloody good. 180 points, so like pretty cheap now. Bravery 6, which I said before doesn't matter too much. 16-inch move. There's a foot option, which is 95 points, which has 1 less wound, so it goes down to 3 wounds, and it's only a 6-inch move and doesn't have run and charge like the Zangor do. But it still has all the same abilities, and it just misses the disc profile, which is a bit of a shame, but not the end of the world. So, their abilities. In the combat phase, enemy units within 3 cannot issue commands. That's enormous. Particularly big for, I think for these guys, for stopping your opponent from using all-out attack, actually. All-out defense is true as well. But in Tzeentch specifically, all-out attack is quite annoying because your -1 to hit is one of the main durability aspects for your demon units. So being able to stop your opponent from nullifying that with +1 to hit is really strong. So you can think of this as, like, in addition to an offensive buff, it's actually also a defensive buff because your opponent can't use +1 attack. There's a bunch of other offensive command abilities in the game as well, which they won't be able to use because of this. So, yeah, it's like a defensive buff as well as an offensive buff. And in addition to that, they've received the 4-up save. So these guys have gone up, like, massively in terms of durability. The other thing they get is +1 to wound if you went second in the battle round, which doesn't do much in Tzeentch because we already have +1 to wound, but in Beasts of Chaos, that's obviously massive. I think these guys are amazing. In Beasts of Chaos, they're amazing. Hitting on 4s does suck, but it kind of makes up for it with the +1 to wound and the ignore commands thing. Really strong. Really, really strong. Alright. So, next we have the heroes, okay? So, we have Mr. Kairos, okay? So Cast Unbind 3. I was actually kind of expecting that to go up to 4, but here we have 3. He's gone up to 16 wounds now as well. He still moves 12. And he's got a few new abilities. So Spell Thief. So if Kairos dispels an enemy spell, he can basically steal it and take control of it. Which is decent. Now, the only problem with this is, like, let's say your opponent casts a purple sun at you, okay? Then it goes to your turn, right? And then you dispel it. And then, because it's your turn, you have to do your start of hero phase stuff first, which includes dispelling it. Then your opponent will just be able to dispel the thing you stole back, right? Yeah, that's the problem. So there are some potential problems with this. But obviously, if it's Purple Sun, they still have to roll above an 8. So, and considering how reliable Kairos is, being able to, like, change the dice, yeah, like, it's still a good ability, but situational for sure. Now, his Oracle of Eternity, which used to be the once per game dice rig, changed to, at the start of your hero phase, if you have less than 9 Destiny dice, you can roll 1 and add it to your Destiny dice pool, which is awesome, like, super good. We'll get you 5 Destiny dice for free over the course of the game. Probably not as good as the dice rig from before, but still incredibly great ability. He has a Beacon of Sorcery, +1 to cast Unbind Dispel. Friendly Wizards Holy with an 18, which is huge, by the way. Also knows all Law of Change spells. Yeah, the reason why the +1 cast a spell roll is huge for Tzeentch, specifically because, like, sometimes you'll find yourself in a matchup where if your opponent is playing, like, Croak or something, and they, like, cast a spell on a 12, even though it's, like, achievable for the chickens to get, like, a 12 on the Unbind, by just getting a 6 and then rigging the other dice to a 6. The fact that you can't add anything to it meant that Croak was kind of had, like, a little bit of diplomatic immunity into this matchup. So I think this is really strong to have the bonuses to cast Unbind and Dispel. And it also stacks as of the moment with, other chickens, which is great. Now, he lost his spawn making spell. So now his spell now is just cast on a 7, range 18. You roll 9 dice on a 3-up, does 1 mortal wound. Yeah, it's a really strong spell, but obviously a bit annoying that you can't turn someone into a spawn. Okay, the Lord of Change is the same War Scroll, but you lose the Oracle of whatever it's called, Oracle of Fate. And other than that, it's basically the same. It has 14 wounds instead of 16. It's a bit cheaper at 400, and you have a few different weapon options. The Baleful Sword has gone up to 3 attacks, but I think you probably still just take the Rod of Sorcery. So you go Rod of Sorcery, and I think you go Rod of Sorcery, and the Staff of Tzeentch is probably what you go to have some shooting. Yeah, still only 2 caster, unfortunately. Okay, so next we have the Horror Heroes. I think there's been some maybe slight overreactions to this from what I've seen so far. The thing to remember these guys is just how expensive they are. Like, the foot guy is just a foot guy, but he costs 140 points. And his spell's fine, like -1 save to an enemy unit with 18. But because he's a foot guy, it's not that likely that he's going to be with an 18. And then the other thing with this army is, that's not as strong as it would be in another army. Because Tzeentch doesn't do damage in the same way that other armies do. Like, if you're doing a lot of damage through spells, putting -1 save on your opponent just doesn't do that much. So you need to have, like, a damage unit. So, like, maybe a unit of Screamers, or a unit of Flamers, or a unit of Zangor and Lighten to make use of this. But then, if you're running those units, again, it's difficult to get this guy in range. So they all have this Arcane Tome ability, though, which is once per game you can reroll a cast and then add 3 to it, which is quite strong in terms of making sure they get their spell off. The only thing is with these guys is that the Law of Fate, remember, is a bit weaker than... the Law of Change, which is the one they get, is a bit weaker than the Law of Fate. So, yeah... If, like, this Arcane Tome thing was on one of the Arcanite dudes, then it would be a bit stronger, okay? Now, the best of these 3, I think he's really solid. Not only because of his speed, but also because of his spell, is the Flux Master. So his spell, basically range 18, cast 8, you roll 9 dice. For each 5-up, the enemy unit takes a mortal wound, which is, like, okay on its own, but then you get a fate point. So, like, on average, this spell on its own will give you 4 fate points from casting it and then getting those things off, so that's just awesome. A+. The Face Skimmer still does the same thing. You need to put it through a portal, and it's cast on a 9, so you're probably going to have to use the Arcane Tome to get it off, and even then it's not guaranteed. Yep, each enemy unit within range takes D through mortals on a 2-up. I don't think this guy's even remotely playable. I don't. So I think that the Flux Master is the best one here. The Changecaster is kind of okay, but I don't think it's particularly game breaking. I don't know if you put the Flux Master in your list or you summon him. You might just summon him because he's only 12, and he gets you more fate points. I don't know. Yeah. If you want to get that spell off early, you're going to have to put it through Portal, and you're probably going to have to use the Arcane Tome to get it off as well. That's something to consider. But overall, he's decent. Okay. We have the Blue Scribes. He's still only a 1 caster. He has this frantic scribbling thing, which you can read on your own because it doesn't do that much. But the main thing is he knows all the spells of Law of Change and Law of Fate, and 2-up he can auto-cast one of them. And also, he can do an endless spell. He can auto-cast a spell and can't be unbound on a 2-up. Still amazing. If they don't reword that Law of Change and Law of Fate thing to only be when he's within Tzeentch, then you will see him allied in every Chaos army that he can go into. But hopefully they fix that. Yeah, I mean, this guy is amazing. They want to keep the Finecast factory in business, clearly. Yep, that's the Blue Scribe. Still awesome. The Changeling. Yeah, now, this guy has a bunch of abilities that are not that relevant, okay? The main thing is he's 160 points for a 2-cast wizard, which is cheap. It's pretty cheap in the context of the rest of this army. Basically, you can, like, remove him from the battlefield after deployment, and at the end of your first movement phase, you have to deploy it within your opponent's territory, more than 3 from them. So, unfortunately, you can't cast spells with him straight after that unless you get the double turn. In the enemy hero phase, you can pick 1 enemy unit with a 9, and until your opponent's next hero phase, so that could be potentially pretty long, you halve the movement characteristic and subtract 1 from the hit rolls of that unit. Not bad synergy with Ravanax Gnashing Jaws. That's fun with this guy. But obviously if your opponent gets a double, that's not going to work. But yeah, I mean, he's okay. I don't know how many lists you'll actually see him in, but on the face of it, the War Scroll's okay. You know, for the 2-cast wizard, has this other stuff that might be decent. Like, if you're playing against Archeon, this could be alright to have this ability. But in a lot of matchups, it's not going to do that much. Yeah. Against, like, dragons, for example, could be really good. Like, halving the unit of 4 dragons movement could be really good. Halving Fulminator's movement could be really good. There's a bunch of things here that could actually be quite good to halve. Like, don't underestimate that ability. But I just don't see, like, how many lists you would actually put this guy in. Like, it sounds decent on paper, but when you sit down to write lists, you don't have, like, points to be thrown around at it, like a maybe might sort of kind of work kind of model. So, yeah, that's my opinion on that. Okay, the Gaunt Summoner. Let's talk about this. So, he's 275 points on disc, and that's the one you take. And he's 6 wounds and a 4-up save. Now, he's not a Arcanite for some reason. He is a demon, and he's a 2-caster. Okay, so he does broadcast the -1 to hit aura, which is nice. He has the Book of Profane Secrets, so he knows all the Fate lore, even though he's not an Arcanite. Cool. I guess he's like a demon reading from a book that he stole from a curseling or something. Just shanked him in the back and stole his book. But he gets +1 to cast Unbind Dispel as well, so very nice. So 2-caster with bonuses innately and knows the better lore. But he can also take a spell from the Fate lore because he's a demon. He has this Lords of the Silver Tower ability, which is just like a fun, fluffy thing where you can like banish an enemy hero under like pretty specific circumstances. And then the other thing it does is the Silvered Portal, which basically you put 2 non-monster Tzeentch units. So it doesn't have to be Disciples of Tzeentch, just Tzeentch. So you could put, I don't know, Varangard or whatever in there. Yeah, and then at the start of the game, before turn 4, can set them up wholly with a 9 of this model, more than 9 from your opponents. You can, like, Babushka by, like, setting up a Gaunt Summoner within a Gaunt Summoner and, like, putting stuff, like you basically, you make a Silver Tower within a Silver Tower, and you put something within the second Silver Tower, and then, like, I don't know, you can do some cool stuff with that, I guess, but I don't know why you would do it, but you can. You can. His spell is a 5-up Horde Clear with short range. It's okay. So that's him. I think for 275 he's a bit expensive. But some maybe kind of play in like plopping horrors down to get in range of your opponent. I think like a super strategic player might just enjoy playing with this guy because it gives you some flexibility in terms of how you deploy. The body is probably 75 points overpriced, so I think you'd pay 200 points maybe for without this ability. or maybe 190. So you're paying about 85 points for this, which is a lot. But maybe it's worth it with specific builds. I don't exactly see it yet, but if someone's got some spice, then let me know. Okay, the Magister. 145 points on disc, which is again probably the one you're going to take. You might take the foot if you just need cheap casters. Now this guy, there's obviously been some discussion about what he can do with the Incarnate. In terms of like slaying himself, and then you send the Incarnate into the Burning Sigil, and the Incarnate dispels it, but then because you can't dispel it round 1, it doesn't disappear, and then it sits there, and you can do it on your opponent's turn again. So that's the thing. But you got to take an Incarnate, and a lot of tournaments are banning the Incarnate now. It's going to get nerfed in the battle scroll, I'm sure. So don't think entirely relevant. So I think he stonks with the Incarnate, and then without it, he's not. Yeah, that's what I think overall. Yeah, so the main thing with this guy is the fact that when he first casts a spell, he can cast another one, but then he has this downside where if you roll a double on the next spell, you transform into a spawn or slay him. But he's got a way around this, which is you take that Cult Demagogue thing from before, which, if you remember, it was like when you cast a spell with a double, it's successful, can't be unbound, and then you get 2 fate points. So you can obviously, because of triggered effects rule in the core rules, you can pick which one to do. So you can do the Cult Demagogue one, and that means that you kind of like, you do your first spell, then you do your second spell, you cast it on a double, he doesn't die, and then you get an additional extra fate points. So you're going to get 2 spells doing it that way. Now, that's kind of a lot of gear to invest on making basically a 2-cast wizard. So, I mean, he's decent. His spell is okay. The timing is not as strong as it is with the Burning Sigil, the making the spawn, and it's short range. So, I think he's just okay. I know why people like him, but I just think in practicality, that Bolt of Change thing is not as good as it seems. Okay? So that's him. Okay, the Curseling. Bit of a meta-dependent lad. I love the new model. I think I maybe would have preferred if they redid the Fate Master instead of the Curseling model, but any fine cast Gorn makes me a happy camper. So he's cast Unbind 2. He's 5 wounds with the 3-up save, which makes him like the ultimate Comet's Call target. So he still dies a lot. Now he rerolls cast and unbinds, and if he unbinds a spell, he can cast Glean Magic, which basically is 30-inch range with a casting value of 4, so it's going to go off. Because, when it actually says it on the War Scroll that you can't unbind Glean Magic when you cast it in your opponent's hero phase, but just remember they can't anyway because you can only unbind spells in your opponent's hero phase. So your opponent can't unbind your spells in their phase. Anyway, basically you just pick a spell from the enemy wizard's War Scroll and you learn it, and you can't learn it if it looks up a damage table. I think it's great with Cult Demagogue because you can really rack up fate points because you can cast spells obviously in your own hero phase and your opponent's hero phase. Because of this Clean Magic thing, so you can really rack up some fate points with these guys. I can really see some build where you take Curseling with this and then you take the Flux Master and you can really rack up fate points quickly. And that's obviously just going to win your games by having more stuff on the board. So I think this guy's pretty good. Obviously the 5 wounds with a 3-up save is the main problem here. So you might consider taking Treacherous Bond on this guy just to keep him alive. But even then, this might be too much of a concern for some people to keep him in their list with 5 wounds. Yeah. Alright, this guy is not good, unfortunately. He's always been a bit lost in this book because it's kind of like a combat hero with a small number of attacks that are good. But he's slow. I know you can take Lorcon now, which is nice, but it's just not that good. It's only 2 attacks, -2 Rend, 3 damage. And then a bunch of other attacks that are not that good. He gets +1 to hit if he's already taken damage in the same phase, which is doable to a certain extent, but he's only 8 wounds, so he could still just die anyway. And his spell is the good part about him, so it's just a d6 mortal wound spell that heals him 1 wound per damage dealt. So he's okay. He's not worth 175 points, and he doesn't have that much synergy with the gear in the book, so I just think he's just okay. Um, yeah, so I mean, I'm gonna put him bin because I mean, like, it's an okay war scroll, but there's so much competition with slots with the heroes, right? Not only in terms of like making sure you have under 7 hero slots, like you can only have 6, but also like, you know, these guys are expensive, so you can't be affording to spend 175 points on something that might do something. Like, I think a lot of people who are going to take this guy, it's going to be like a pet unit, but a lot of these new books where the units are expensive, it's less okay to take a pet unit, I think, unfortunately. But if you want to take this, I would encourage you to use Lorcon with it. Okay, next we have one of the best units in the book, which is a Fate Master, the Finecast Supreme. So he's 16-inch move, 6 wounds, 3 up save, great. He has a 4 up spell ignore as well, which is actually pretty handy for this kind of profile, like high save, low wounds. And he has a +1 to wound aura that works in shooting and melee, wholly within 9. Awesome. You're gonna see him. He gives you a battle tactic. He's durable. His combat's okay. I haven't put it on there, but it's alright. And yeah, the +1 to wound is obviously awesome. So you're gonna see him, definitely. I mean, you kind of look at this kind of war scroll and you're like, well, what's the Ogroid doing compared to this guy? Like, the combat's not even better on the Ogroid. So anyway, that's what he is. Get your early. I think this guy's early 2000s. I'm not going to say 90s, but I think he's early 2000s Finecast. So gotta get some of that stuff. All right, Zangor Shaman. This guy is being slept on. Now I'll tell you why. Because he used to give +1 to hit aura, but his Sorceress Elixir got way better. So it used to just be cast an extra spell and you could re-roll it. But this is cast an extra spell and you add +3 to it. Now, the reason that that's good is because there are a bunch of Lore of Fate spells which you kind of need to get off, right? You need to get Shield of Fate off for the 5-up ward. You need to get Arcane Suggestion off when it's in range for the -1 save, or the hit and wound debuff, or the no commands thing, okay? So the fact that you can guarantee getting spells off and you get to cast an extra one makes these guys awesome, okay? And they're also kind of the cheapest hero for their cost, right? Because the Magistron disc is 145, and these guys are 10 points cheaper. Their spell kind of sucks because you're not going to take Zangors, but the fact that they just have this elixir makes them worth it. I know that seems really strange, that a unit with basically one rule would be good, but it is in this army because you need to get certain spells off, you need to get endless spells off, you need to get your Lore of Fate spells off, and you need to be able to get spells off to get fate points. So, like, front loading your early game with these guys, taking like 2 or 3 of them, and just guaranteeing you get important spells off is totally a valid strategy. Because you can take cogs, you can give them rerolls to cast, and then, so in the second spell is going to be rerolls to cast with +3, +4 it could be near a chicken. So you could have +4 to cast with rerolls on a 135 point model. Like, that's amazing. I know it sucks that he lost his buff for the Zangors, but yeah, I mean, this guy's just really solid because he can get what you need to get done. You know, I think he's really good. And like compared to the other ones, he's actually like pretty durable for his points as well. Like 6 wounds or 4 up save is fine, and the 16th move is great as well. So yeah, I'm not just like full hoping him because I like have some of these that are well painted, but like I think this guy is pretty solid still. Yeah. All right. So, just at the end here, I just wanted to give a summary of what I think are some of the best units in the book. As we got a crow timing at the perfect point in the background. I hope they came in on the audio because, yeah, I really like the chickens. I think the Lord of Change and Kairos are both great in this book. The +1 to cast aura is awesome. And the fact that they know all the Lore of Change spells now means they're carrying all the damage spells as well as Fold Reality, which is really good for one of the other units on this screen, the Screamers. So I really like these guys. And then we have the Horrors. I mentioned before, they're amazing for reasons of winning the game because, you know, holding objectives wins your game in Age of Sigmar. So units that can do that well will win your games. The Screamers, I think, got a big glow up, so I think they're really good as well. So, I've got a couple lists here. So the first one is a Host Arcanum one, okay, and its focus is Kairos and Screamers with some pink horrors. So basically, it's taking the Destiny dice Grand Strat because it's super easy to do when you can replace them with Kairos. And then you take a Fate Master with Arcane Tome. I've also taken a spell enhancement here, so he has Arcane Suggestion and Fusion Arcanum. I've got a Cursling with Cult Demagogue. I've given him a Treacherous Bonner, but I just realized I don't have a mortal unit. I guess one of those Screamers units needs to be a Kyric Acolyte unit, but anyway. And he has Shield of Fate, which is the main thing he's going to cast. Then I've got that janky unit before, which is 19 pinks and 1 blue. Now this unit basically you're gonna like run it forward, and just give it a 5-up ward. Now I haven't actually taken Bridge in this list, and the reason I didn't is just because I feel like you're gonna want to play this more as like a castle. I know that seems a little bit strange considering how fast it is, but I think you want to play the Screamers as more of a counterpunch. Like you stick the horrors in the front, and then you stick the Screamers behind them. And because the Screamers are an expert conquerors, you should score the objective, even if your opponent moves stuff on them. So they got to like clear the horrors to actually get in combat with the stuff that's holding the objective. So I think that makes this really good at like contesting the mid board, and obviously you got that great zone control just from the potential damage output of Kairos. Now I've taken the Tome of Eyes here because I really want Kairos to have rerolls to cast early, and it's just more reliable than Cogs and doesn't cost me it doesn't cost me a spell in the first turn, so I think it's really strong. If you take Cogs, you can't fit one of the arcane things in here, so I think the one change I'd just make here is that unit of 3 Screamers just needs to be a Kyric Acolytes unit, but yeah, that's the idea of this list. Okay. And the second list I've got, it's just a bit of fun. I think Guild of Summoners has some play just because of the battle tactic, and also I think if you run a crap load of pink horrors, you can afford to just summon chickens. Like here I have 40 pink horrors, which is, it's 200 wounds. So it says 72 wounds, but actually it's 192 wounds, this list. It's got the Cursling again, and then we've got a Gaunt Summoner, both to get access to the whole lore, but also to be able to pick up the 2 Expert Conqueror ones. And then the plan is to bridge the other one. So you bridge the 20 in with the buff, with the 5-up ward buff from Shield of Fate, and then the other 10 you just move up with the Gaunt Summoner and just plop them on objectives where they need to be. So it's actually quite a fast list, even though it looks slow. It's also relatively low drop. Like it's not 1 drop, but 6 drop these days is often low enough to outdrop like the high drop armies. And the reason you still want to be relatively high drop is just because you want those 2 10s to be an expert conquerors. It's absolutely worth it, in my opinion, to make sure that you capture objectives with these guys. And yeah, that's what that list does. It basically has a lot of bodies already, and then can get heaps of fate points because you got the 2 Zangor Shamans and both heroes there. So you got 3 casts from the Cursling, 2 from the Gaunt Summoner with rerolls, and then you got 2 from both Zangor Shamans. Then you got 3 pink horror banners and a Kyric Acolytes. So that more than manageably gets you the 9 on the first turn. Yeah, and then you can summon a Lord of Change, and then your casting becomes more reliable, and you can get more fate points. And importantly as well, you're going to have a demon on the board then for your -1 to hit aura, because right now the only thing you got is the Gaunt Summoner. So that's what this list does. The only thing I might consider changing here is finding a way to get the Flux Master in here, because you obviously can't summon him, and his spell's going to be really good for getting the chicken. But to do that, yeah, you need to change probably one of the units of pinks to Kyrics, which maybe isn't worth it. So, yeah, that's this list. So, I hope you've enjoyed my review today. I've lost my voice a little bit at the end here. Yeah, now if you like what I'm doing here, I do a lot more stuff on Patreon now than I do on YouTube. So, like for example, the tier list I've updated. It's on Patreon. We now do that monthly. So, I'll be updating the tier list monthly. Obviously, I know not everyone can afford to support on Patreon. So if you want to support me, the best way you can do that is by subscribing to the video, by sharing it with people you know, and also dropping a like down there. That really helps us out. So this has been Iron Gutsman, and I will see you guys very soon. I will have both reviews of all the books that are coming out soon, And then I'm also going to have a few When the Dust Settles. The next one will be Flesh Eater Cause. Okay, I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.